Kenya, a land of vibrant cultures and breathtaking landscapes. Yet beneath this facade of unity, a bitter truth festers. Political rivalries simmer, often boiling over into spectacles of animosity. Leaders clash, slinging accusations and counter-accusations. The government and the opposition engage in a perpetual tug-of-war, seemingly fighting for the soul of the nation. But as we delve deeper, a disturbing question arises. Are we truly witnessing a battle of principles or a scramble for power and privilege? The Kenyan political landscape is often painted as a dichotomy, the government versus the opposition. We are led to believe that these two forces represent opposing ends of the political spectrum, offering distinct choices for the electorate. However, as we move beyond the rhetoric and examine the actions of our leaders, a different picture emerges. A picture where the lines between government and opposition become blurred, where self-interest takes precedence over national interest. Are we then, the citizens of Kenya, being manipulated into supporting individuals who, despite their political posturing, share a common goal, self-enrichment, at the expense of the very people they claim to represent? In the heart of Kenya's political theatre, a cruel irony plays out. We, the ordinary citizens, are told that we are the heart and soul of the nation. Our votes, we are reminded, hold the power to shape the destiny of our country. Yet behind this facade of empowerment lies a stark reality. Once the elections are over, the promises made on grand stages fade into distant echoes. The leaders we elect, entrusted with safeguarding our welfare, often morph into distant figures, their ears deaf to our pleas, their eyes blind to our struggles. The bitter truth that many Kenyans are reluctant to accept is this: we are on our own. The institutions designed to protect us, to amplify our voices, often fail to deliver. The government, tasked with providing essential services, is often plagued by corruption and inefficiency. The opposition, meant to hold the government accountable, frequently seems more interested in securing its own share of the spoils. We have been conditioned to believe in the power of democracy, in the promise that our voices matter. Our silence, our inaction, becomes their greatest weapon. It allows them to operate with impunity, to plunder the nation's resources without consequence. It perpetuates a culture of fear and resignation, where speaking truth to power is seen as a futile and even dangerous act. We must move beyond the illusion of representation and demand genuine accountability from our leaders. We must recognize that our allegiance should not lie with any particular politician or party, but with the principles of good governance, transparency, and accountability. One of the most potent weapons in the arsenal of Kenyan politicians is the manipulation of ethnic identity. In a nation of diverse ethnicities and cultures, the appeal to tribal loyalty runs deep. Politicians understand this dynamic all too well. They use it to build their power bases, to rally support along ethnic lines, and to deflect criticism. They paint themselves as protectors of their communities, guardians of their interests, even as they enrich themselves at the expense of the nation as a whole. This cynical manipulation of ethnic identity has a corrosive effect on Kenyan society. When a leader is accused of wrongdoing, their first line of defense is often to retreat behind the shield of ethnicity. They portray any criticism as an attack on their community, a sign of disrespect to their culture. Citizens are pressured to defend their own, regardless of the evidence presented against them. This culture of impunity allows corrupt leaders to operate with little fear of consequence. The consequences of this ethnic manipulation are profound and far-reaching. It undermines national unity, creating a climate of fear and suspicion. It hampers economic development as resources are channeled not to areas of greatest need, but to regions that offer the most political support. Worst of all, it erodes trust in the very fabric of Kenyan democracy. When citizens believe that their leaders are more interested in serving their ethnic group than the nation as a whole, they become disillusioned. Breaking free from this cycle of ethnic manipulation requires a collective effort. The 2017 Kenyan general elections left the nation deeply divided. Raila Odinga, the leader of the NASA coalition, had challenged the re-election of Uhuru Kenyatta, alleging widespread irregularities. Tensions were high, protests erupted, and the spectre of violence loomed large. It was against this backdrop of uncertainty that a seemingly momentous event occurred: the handshake. On March 9, 2018, Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga emerged from a closed-door meeting, hands clasped, smiles beaming. However, as the dust settled, questions began to arise about the true nature of the handshake. The agreement itself lacked specifics, offering vague promises of unity and reform without outlining concrete steps. The once vocal opposition, led by Raila Odinga, went eerily silent. The fiery rhetoric against corruption that had defined their campaign trail disappeared. The public, initially hopeful for change, began to sense that a different game was afoot, one played in the shadows beyond the reach of public scrutiny. As time went on, the true cost of the handshake became increasingly apparent. Key opposition figures were absorbed into the government, their voices effectively silenced through appointments to lucrative positions. Criticism of the government dwindled, replaced by a chorus of praise and support. The war on corruption, once a rallying cry for the opposition, was quietly shelved. Scandals that had once dominated headlines were swept under the rug. The handshake, it seemed, had come at a steep price: the integrity of Kenya's democracy. The handshake, rather than ushering in an era of unity and progress, had instead solidified a system where political expediency trumped the needs of the people. It created a facade of cooperation that masked a deeper truth, a pact between elites to protect their interests at all costs. The Kenyan people, once again, found themselves on the losing end of a political bargain. Their hopes for a more just and equitable society were dashed against the rocks of self-serving political maneuvering. The handshake served as a stark reminder that in the theatre of Kenyan politics, the script is often pre-written, the actors carefully chosen, and the audience left to applaud a performance that serves only to perpetuate the status quo. As the weight of corruption and economic hardship pressed down on the Kenyan people, a wave of unrest began to surge. Young people, burdened by the failures of their leaders, took to the streets. Their voices, filled with anger and frustration, demanded accountability and an end to the culture of impunity. The government, accustomed to operating with impunity, found itself facing a public increasingly unwilling to tolerate their excesses. The opposition, sensing an opportunity to regain lost relevance, saw a chance to exploit the public's anger for their own gain. And so began a cynical dance, a carefully choreographed performance designed to appease the public while safeguarding the interests of the political elite. Behind this theatre of concern, a different reality was unfolding. The government, recognizing the need to quell the unrest, reached out to their supposed adversaries in the opposition. Secret meetings were held, backroom deals struck. The message was clear: stability at any cost. The opposition, eager to reclaim a share of power, readily agreed to play their part. They toned down their criticism, focusing their attacks on the symptoms of corruption rather than the systemic rot at the heart of the Kenyan state. This unholy alliance, forged in the crucible of public unrest, served to strengthen the existing power structure. To maintain the illusion of a functioning democracy, a carefully crafted narrative was spun. The opposition, it was claimed, had forced the government to make concessions to address the concerns of the people. New committees were formed, task forces assembled. The machinery of government whirred into motion, churning out reports and pronouncements that promised a brighter future. But behind this facade of progress, the reality remained unchanged. The same individuals who had presided over years of corruption and misgovernance remained firmly in control. The unrest, which had momentarily threatened to upset the balance of power, was effectively neutralized. The government, with the complicity of the opposition, had weathered the storm. The charade of Kenyan democracy continued, with both sides playing their assigned roles to perfection. The government pretended to govern, enacting policies designed to line their own pockets while paying lip service to the needs of the people. Perhaps the most disheartening aspect of this elaborate political theatre is not the deception itself, but the audience's reaction. Kenyans, it seems, have become inured to the lies, the broken promises, the blatant disregard for their well-being. They cheer for their political idols, even as those idols pick their pockets and mortgage their future. Politicians, masters of manipulation, understand the power of spectacle. They stage rallies complete with pulsating music, fiery speeches, and carefully orchestrated displays of adulation. It's tempting, in the face of such widespread delusion, to simply shrug and accept the status quo, to conclude that Kenyans are complicit in their own oppression, that they deserve the leaders they get. But this cynicism, while understandable, is ultimately unhelpful. It absolves the political class of their responsibility, allowing them to continue their predatory ways without consequence. The truth is, not all Kenyans are fooled. There are those who see through the charade, who understand the game being played. They recognize that the choice between the government and the opposition is often a false one, that both sides serve the same master greed. These voices of dissent, however, are often drowned out by the chorus of sycophancy and blind loyalty. They are labelled as troublemakers, as unpatriotic, as enemies of progress. The weight of societal pressure, the fear of reprisal, often silences them. And so, the charade continues. The politicians lie, the people cheer, and Kenya bleeds. It's a vicious cycle, one that has trapped the nation in a seemingly endless loop of corruption, impunity, and underdevelopment. Breaking free from this cycle requires a fundamental shift in mindset. It demands that Kenyans recognize the power they possess, not just at the ballot box, but in their daily lives. It requires them to question everything, to demand accountability from their leaders, to refuse to be silenced by fear or intimidation. The most potent weapon against deception is not anger, but disbelief. When the people stop believing the lies, when they stop cheering for their oppressors, the walls of the charade begin to crumble. It is in the quiet moments of reflection, in the hushed conversations behind closed doors, that the seeds of change are sown. It is in the courage of individuals who dare to speak truth to power, who refuse to be complicit in their own oppression, that hope for a better future lies. The journey will be long, the road ahead fraught with challenges, but the destination is worth fighting for, a Kenya where the people are truly sovereign, where their voices are heard, and where their leaders are accountable. The narrative of Kenyan politics has been one of betrayal and disillusionment. We have witnessed the chasm between rhetoric and reality. The political elite have enriched themselves while the masses struggle. But amidst the despair, a glimmer of hope emerges. The Kenyan people are beginning to stir. A new generation is rising to demand accountability. They are raising their voices, demanding a seat at the table. This awakening is about reclaiming our narrative. It is about justice, equality, and good governance. The journey ahead will be arduous. The forces of corruption run deep, but the tide is turning. The Kenyan people demand change. They seek transparency and accountability. This is a call for evolution, not revolution. It's about harnessing collective power for a better future. Leaders must prioritize the nation over selfish desires. The journey begins with each of us. It is time for a new dawn in Kenya.